Yeah, well, good evening, everyone. I'm super happy to be here tonight at the product camp. I know I like these after hour kind of things at 7. It's really nice timing. So today the topic of my talk is going to be how to create accessible and inclusive user experience for everyone. So the idea is how to create truly universal and inclusive designs. And over the next half an hour, 20 minutes, if we have some questions, I will tell you a little bit how one architect perspective can shape how we live. Then I'm going to show you how we are still sadly living in a non-inclusive digital world. Then I will give you some hints on how to get rid of these design biases. And last but not least, we're going to see how to avoid the pitfalls of AI in design and why it can be a bit dangerous to rely exclusively on new technologies in order to create innovative designs. And before we get started, I will shortly present myself. So my name is Guillaume. I'm a French designer and founder of ENNOstudio, which is a product design consultancy based in Berlin, Germany. And we usually design product for big companies in Europe, so airlines, bank, insurances, but also we start to have more and more startups, but usually we tackle big groups and big companies. So yeah, and a quick introduction. Before actually diving into the world of design, I had the chance to attend some architecture classes at the School of Architecture of Paris Belleville. So it was a really short career path because I just didn't have the skills to become an architect. But over my times there, I had I attended a lot of interesting classes, and I got to discover a little bit this architect called Le Corbusier. So he's actually a Swiss-born architect, but he became later on naturalized French. And he's quite famous because, he designed, for instance, the Villa Savoye here, you can see on the left, but also he was one of the first architects to deal with functionism, like a really functional architecture. Also with cubism and brutalism. So quite an interesting background. But why I found him quite interesting is because he tries really to challenge the way the architecture world was going, and that's exactly what I'm going to speak a little bit today at the beginning. This guy basically came up with a system called the modular. The modular is a new standard. So his idea, which is still really progressive and innovative, is like he wanted to get rid of the imperial system, in inches, in feet, the British standards, but also of the metrics in meters, centimeters. He wanted to create a brand new system, but based on human features. So his idea was, if I'm going to use a chair, basically I need to measure the distance between my S and the floor. If I need to design a closet, I want to see how many units is between my shoulder and the door handle. So the whole system, the whole idea behind modular was really to rely on the different position of the human being and really create a new standard. So quite a revolutionizing idea, beginning of the century. And to do so, he decided to rely on one reference point, which was a real human being. And in this case, I read that he was a bit a fan of Sherlock Holmes, from Conan Doyle. So he decided to build the blueprints based on a man 183 centimeters tall, so like a typical British bobby, this British cop. And based on this man, he calculated all these human units in order to design the size of the door frame, of the windows, the height of the door handle, how the chair should be. So this human being was the blueprint basically for the modular system. And that's actually became quite a success because he invented this system in 1943, if I'm not mistaken. And then 6 years later, the first building here, the headquarters of the United Nations in New York, was entirely built following these real modular standards. So it's not something that was only a theory. It really became a reality quite quickly, right? And what is a little bit interesting is obviously that by following this plan, this ideal proportion of one human being, he automatically excluded many people from the use. So let's say kids, for instance, that have a different height, or if we look at the average height of men and women worldwide, women are a little bit smaller than men in average. So many units in a building were not fitting their proportion. Also, people with disability could not properly use, his design in architecture. So, that's that the whole problem with using only one reference point. You obviously are going to exclude certain people from the design, from the use. So why I tell you that? You will tell me like, well, we are all tech people, we are all designers, developers, project manager. We thrive in the digital world, and tech is extremely progressive. So why do we care about like this analog world from the beginning of the century? Well, because unfortunately, the digital world is not truly inclusive and actually follows the same mistake. And I'm going to give you a few concrete examples based on my own experience. I've been browsing some websites using screen reader to simulate a little bit what is it to use a website when you have visual impairment, so to say. So I use the screen reader going on one of these big e-commerce platform, and basically what I heard was, you are currently in a web area, link wish list minus product.html, header 1 categories, image link, button, header 2 live, link. So just imagine you have to rely on that to browse this platform. You are automatically lost and thus completely excluded from the use. Another example, I want you to open a bank account. Well, I don't want to do some finger pointings, but the logos are there. But I want you to open a bank account at a big German bank. And the really first question that popped up when I tried to do the onboarding process was basically that I had to say if I was eine Frau or ein Herr. So in English, woman or man. So me as a non-binary user, I would be automatically excluded from day one, from the first step of the onboarding process. And last but not least, another example, I stumbled across this post from an employee of Apple, Ashley, who is a deaf user, and she basically says that 98% of the stock pictures that she found online are actually just fake, just not authentic. So just imagine you as a company, you want to be inclusive and show that you actually are compatible with your own mission and vision is compatible with deaf users, and you just choose as illustrations some people mimicking deaf languages, and that just like not only frustrating, it's super offending, right? So as you can see, there's just a few examples, and there's so many like online courses with subtitles. You will find shitload of these examples, unfortunately. And the thing is, these analog biases we have because architects base solely their vision on one user are unfortunately taken over in a digital world. And the reason behind it is actually quite natural, is that people, a human being, tend to design, tend to create and craft for themselves. When you are a kid, when we ask you to draw a house, you used, not to create maybe like some really exotic architecture. You're actually replicating, drawing things that something around you. You have a typical house with a garden, with the trees that your grandparents have, or that you can see in a coloring book. So, we tend as a human being to replicate things we know. But the sad truth is that by doing so, we automatically exclude many people from the population because we are per se different than the rest of the world. And if you tell me that I exaggerate, well, I would just invite you to have a look at the people behind the future of technology, right? Have a look at the people deciding our future. I don't want to draw big conclusions, but obviously, all these people belong to an homogeneous group of people. They have similar features, so to say. And these people are really deciding on our tech future. And I'm going to give you some figures to back this up. Google is one of the most progressive companies out there. They are doing a lot, but really a lot for their employee. I believe it is one of the most inclusive tech giants. And yet, more than half of their employees are actually white, and 70% from them are male. So for a company which is globally active, for a company who are like basically offices everywhere in the world, it's quite a tricky, position to design products for the rest of the world. And that's Google. I didn't took on purpose Amazon or Uber, which obviously don't have the same statistics. And one of, well, no, not the excuse, but one of the reasons I tend to hear quite a bit during project is that, well, we concentrate on the standard user because the rest are basically edge case. I don't know if you know, but this idea of edge case is a bit like the magic box that you open when you don't want to tackle other users or other use case in general. You just say, well, you know what? It's just an edge case. Put it in the backlog, and maybe when we have resources, we can deal with it. Well, the thing is, why should we care? Why should we think differently, right? Well, one of the first reasons, your parents probably told you like, well, be nice, be kind to people. Do not do only things for you, selfishly, but try to think for other people. That should be actually enough. The reason, just to be kind, and when you design things, to think also of people that are usually not like you. But I understand that's usually not enough as a trigger and a drive, to challenge the status quo. So I would just try to point out something that at some point of our life, we can all become one of these edge case. Edge case can be temporary, it can be situational. Let's say you break your arm, so you can't type properly, or you have like some ear infection, so you can hear properly, or even, a bit more dramatic. I heard about this. I read about this case that a woman I actually had some cancer, and she was desperately trying to regain weight. She was trying desperately to recover from a sickness, and every time she climbed on a smart weight, she actually was congratulated by the scale for telling her, well, good stuff. You lost another half a kilo, which was obviously not what she wanted to hear, because it was not healthy for her. Or me as a foreigner, like me living in Germany, the first SMS that I received were like only in German, and it was obviously sometimes hard for me to understand the COVID alerts in a really critical moment. And if you want to put a bit more first world problem, let's say you are at work, you are like you are browsing, some TikTok videos. Well, obviously you can't listen them with a sound because your boss will hear that. So sometimes you may not be behaving like a standard user. Even so, it's only situational, it's only temporary. So that's already a good reason to change the status quo. But also from a company perspective, much more corporate perspective, actually doing more inclusive products is obviously good for the sales, because if you satisfy a higher amount of customers, you will obviously have more money at the end of the day, right? And on top of that, you can also become really the niche product for these other users, for this non-standard user. If you are the only e-commerce platform 100% compatible for screen readers, you will basically take over all the market, right? And also last advantage for the company is that by behaving, by trying to come up with new solution, by changing and tweaking your product in order to make it more inclusive, more accessible, you actually trigger a bit innovation, creativity, because you're going to look at your product from a different perspective. And I'm going to come back to you that a little bit. but it's really motivating imagination to look at other clients and other kind of customers while designing or creating products. And last but not least, something I've been testifying firsthand, unfortunately, when users feel excluded from the use of a product or services, they are going to complain, they are going to leave bad product reviews, bad comments, and so on. So this is actually also quite a drastic impact that you want to avoid if your product is not optimized, is not gender neutral, or is not accessible for people with visual impairments, all these kind of things. So yeah, there's definitely enough reason out there to change a bit the status quo. And now I'm going to show you a little bit how is it possible, how to make it, how to design product in a more inclusive way. And before getting started, I will give you my really own definition of inclusive design, because there's many things out there. We speak about accessibility, we speak about positive integration, about non-binary. I mean, there's a lot of buzzword outside, and what I mean with inclusive design is creating products that are accessible by as many people as possible, ideally by everyone at any given time. So the really simple, really simple definition. When you design inclusive products, well, it basically means that it's accessible by everyone. And the way to do that, I know some people will say like, oh yeah, we know we have to involve, but really do it. Try to involve as many people as possible, as many users as possible while you do so. And it's actually it shouldn't be a rocket science, because we are all in this sphere. We all were born with this. I mean, we all work at least with this ethos of design thinking. And the really first step of design thinking is to build empathy, build understanding how your user work, how they behave, how they think. So it shouldn't even be a surprise, like we have to involve all the users possible, as many users as possible, because it's the really base of our work if we follow the design thinking principle. And the way to do so, and I'm going to give you a few tips because I did that, so it's not only theory, it's something that does exist, is doing your customer research. When you deal with personas, when you deal with user profile, try to concentrate on scenarios and environment rather than only demographic. Like this is Tom, he works at a startup, he's more than 30 and he earns shit lot of money. Now try to a little bit explain the context and also the limitation of these users. And by engaging with this non-standard user, actually you will make your product much more competitive. And the second way to involve these non-standard users is by doing testing. I think everyone here does testing, but I would advise you to get in touch with some associations. So I mean, ourselves, we speak a lot with Association for Blind and people with visual impairments, and they're actually super happy to give some feedback, to test things for you, and they really want to change the status quo. So sometimes when you are dealing with a new design, just drop either like a mock-up or like a test version to one of the people of this association, and they will be super happy to change to provide valuable feedback. Second one, how to change that. There are a lot of available tools out there, such as screen reader simulators for people with visual impairments. I would advise you to check Google Talkback, Apple VoiceOver, or even from Windows. There are a few cool stuff out there. Also check the contrast. Just for a quick reminder, almost 10% of men are colorblind. So there is definitely much more understanding of your design that you believe. So definitely have a look at this kind of website. And last but not least, there are also some accessibility checker out there, such as Google Lighthouse that I just showed on a previous slide, and Site Improve. And these tools are obviously there to help you to assess the technical accessibility and inclusiveness. They are not here as a social and cultural check, so to say. That's something you can't automatize. But already, if you can tackle these kind of things, Luckily, quite a plus. Some advice on how to improve that: read the guidelines. It's not, the most interesting read when you come back to work, but it's really valuable because you do it that once, and it will really always stick at the end of your head when you start a new project. You have a different understanding of what to look at when if you either review a product or if you participate actively to the development of a product or service. And the big Bible for this is, by the way, if you have any question, I'm going to check from time to time the chat to see if something is not understandable. I know that with my accent, it's it was scissor hand. Yeah. Well, I mean, it's not easy to type on a keyboard with scissors. Yeah, I'm going to check from time to time the chat, but it's hard because it's a full screen. But anyway, I will keep five minutes at the end of the talk to answer your question. So what I meant, Bible for accessibility is a WCAG. So they are based on a really simple principle that every design that you do is based on the POL principle. What you do, what you conceive, should be perceivable. So you should get the information to your brain. It should be operable. So you have to be able to interact with the design. Understandable, because you have to, check, understand what's behind the design. And last but not least, has to be compatible with everything, every device, every technology out there. And this translates in this scoring from A to AAA. And usually AAA is quite hard to get, to be honest, because it has a lot of limitation, a lot of things to look at. But if your product can already reach, the minimum requirements, A, it's already a really, really good start. And I strongly encourage you to have a look at this at the requirement. If one day you deal with a software or with an app, or even with a website, because it makes a difference. And if you are really bored on Saturday evening, I invite you to have a look at the developers guidelines. And me, as a designer, I don't understand everything, but I pick up some key information that actually help me to assess the inclusiveness of a product. For instance, when I see where we're discussing a design and I see something developed, I will ultimately ask if a CTA has the right position, if it's not too close from the border, if it actually has the hidden information for the screen reader, is behind there's something like this is a CTA, please click to get there, if it has the good contrast. It's just broad these are guidelines in order to understand a little bit how the technology behind accessibility work. The most important advice, which is the fourth one, just get started, because building creating inclusive design is not something you do overnight. You can't decide to say like, oh, you know what, we're going to create inclusive design next year when we launch a new version. It's not like that. It's something that you have to improve. It's something you have to implement step by step. So if you are involved in a development of a software or services, and you work in iteration, try at every iteration, to say, hey, by the way, did we thought about inclusiveness? Do we think about being gender neutral? Did we think about not discriminating anyone? Make sure that people with visual impairment can deal with that. Try always to challenge, try to bring it. If you don't have the power to implement yourself, at least be part of the discussion, because if you're not going to do it, nobody will. That's sad but true. Okay, and then my last chapter, and I'm going to be like super short, so if there's some question, I will be happy to answer them. The last question is the future of design. And I'm really convinced that AI is already playing a huge role in designing product, but we are still at the really beginning of the journey. And one of the big hope I have regarding AI in design is how to improve the overall user experience, because machine learning obviously learn from the user behavior and then can adapt. I think if you have Facebook, already been noticing that I watch a lot of cooking videos, for instance. I binge them, and what happened is like when I open my Facebook, the central button of the tab bars is the video button, because Facebook recognized that I binge a lot of videos, so they are going to push these features in front of me, in front of my eyes. So UX is really going to learn from the user and adapt in order to provide, the perfect design, the perfect interface based on the needs, but also abilities of each individual. And something as exciting as well in design is how to use AI for research and testing. I mean, right now I don't know if you've been doing some user research or user testing. Usually you have usually like with two person, you have a designer and a user researcher. You interview the person, and the information that you collect is that did the user found this feature or this functionality? Yes or not? Was it hard? Yes or not? Okay, and then you fill some Excel sheet. You forget half of the situation, and then you switch to the next user. You already forgot the last one. So I mean, I exaggerate obviously, but it's still quite basic. But with the help of AI, with the help of a new kind of analytics tools, you can also try to understand biometric data. If I'm like mad, if I'm happy, if I'm actually like super relaxed, and combine all this information in order to provide a way more accurate conclusion and way more accurate test results. So definitely a huge potential for AI in the future of design. But obviously, that's the dream, and the reality is far from this vision. AI at the moment in design has really strong limits, and I'm going to show you why. I don't know if, well, I mean, you hopefully know Twitter, but what you maybe don't know is that they came up with a new kind of algorithm in order to crop pictures. And what happened, I think they changed that since then, but that was like back in 2020, so last year. When you post a really long picture, it's obviously not looking good on your feed because you will have a long picture and then all the tweets will disappear. So they decided to crop it automatically. And to optimize the cropping process, they decided, okay, we should really focus on the most important parts of the picture. And instead of having one employee deciding, what are the most important part of the cropped picture, they decided to automatize that. And the issue is that the algorithm automatically preferred to crop a white male instead of person of color, and in this case, an Afro-American like Barack Obama, which was the freaking president of the United States, and much more important, so to say, than this Mitch McConnell. So Twitter's algorithm had like a huge bias in this regard. I'm going to give you another one from Amazon. They decided to automatize, the human resources and the recruiting process, and have all the CV screened by a software, an AI software. And what happened is that only male application were actually taken. I mean, the software basically disliked women, and some female application were actually much better than the male one. But I'm going to explain you why. The issue is that AI really rely on data that we are feeding to the algorithm. So if we feed, in this case, only CV of male, it will understand, well, that's a point of reference. If the Twitter algorithm has mostly white male picture at the reference point, they will automatically try to crop, the white male picture. And that's a bit, the issue that we have with AI, is that by feeding biases, like our human biases, we risk to reprogram the current and the past discrimination, gender issues, and non-inclusiveness into the future. And the crazy thing is that AI is only going to multiply the effect. So if we are not careful, we are going to replicate by time X the same mistake that we have at the moment. So that's why our role as creators and as designers, developers, is really to make sure that if we're going to use more and more of these tools in the future, we have to really feed the data sets with truly inclusive data in order to make sure that this is halfway more inclusive. We really have to have this ethical duty in place in order to make sure that the algorithm treating the information are truly neutral and truly inclusive. So I'm going to do a quick wrap up, and then I'll let you maybe ask some questions if you have some. First of all, well, don't design for the people, design with them. And that means getting rid of this idea of edge case, or at least, for designing in creating interfaces. Then my big lesson will be like, educate yourself. There's a really a lot of interesting talks, a lot of interesting, much more interesting than mine, a lot of interesting documentation, books and articles out there on what it means to create inclusive design, but also understand that it's our duty, like a designer, developers, or people partaking to development of product and services to really challenge the status quo, because if we don't do it, nobody else will do it. And hopefully, inclusive design will not be like a fancy buzzword for a talk like mine in the next years, but will be simply called like design, and we won't have to deal anymore with this kind of problematic, because we'll solve all the problems within the next years. Thank you so much for your attention. I hope you managed to understand my French accent.